in Mago Reddit. Today's story is
My mother-in-law spread the word that my son was seriously ill for 3 years, but when her lie cost her millionaire husband money, she exploded in an unforgivable way. Hello, Reddit community. My life is pretty disorganized at the moment, and I need your advice. My name is Astrid, I'm 33 years old, and I've been married for 7 years to my husband Kenji, also 33. From the beginning of our marriage, we tried to conceive, but we faced fertility problems. It was an emotionally draining experience. Months of trying, negative tests, endless doctor visits, and the constant feeling that my body was failing me. It also affected our marriage. We both wanted to have children, and although Kenji always supported me by assuring me that it wasn't my fault, I couldn't help feeling that I was letting him down. As if that wasn't enough, my 57-year-old mother-in-law, Lena, only made things worse. She never liked me, even before Kenji and I got married. To her, I was never good enough for her precious son. She comes from a traditional family, and I suppose she expected Kenji to marry someone else. I don't know. Someone obedient, submissive, a person dedicated exclusively to serving her husband and raising children. I'm not sure exactly what kind of daughter-in-law she expected, but clearly I didn't meet her expectations. She had a particular way of making me feel rejected without saying it directly. She didn't insult me openly, but she found little ways to belittle me. Compliments with a double meaning, comparisons with Kenji's ex-girlfriends, comments about how I hadn't been brought up properly because I didn't know how to cook traditional dishes like her. At first, I really tried hard to win her approval. I thought that if I was nice enough and tried hard enough, she would eventually accept me, but it never happened. After we got married, she immediately started talking about babies. Every time we saw each other, she would make comments about how a wife's duty was to give her husband children or how a family wasn't complete without children. She wasn't subtle at all. And when we started having difficulties conceiving, she took it as evidence of my failure. She never said it directly, but I knew she blamed me. I remember once having dinner at her house when she looked at me and said, "Some women are naturally fertile. Others, well, they have a harder time, right?" I was sitting right across from her. I understood perfectly what she was implying. Kenji always tried to smooth things over, telling me to just ignore it or that she didn't mean it that way. But I knew the truth. 4 years I put up with this. Her passive-aggressive comments, her disappointment, the constant pressure. Finally, 3 years ago, I got pregnant. It was the happiest moment of my life. I can't even put into words how much I wanted that baby. After all the difficulties, the pain and the tears, I finally had a little life growing inside me. I thought maybe this would change things, that maybe Lena would finally accept me and see me as part of the family. But no. If anything changed, it was for the worse. She seemed to resent me even more after I gave birth. I don't know if she was upset because I had proved her wrong or if she just hated me so much, but she barely paid attention to her grandson. She didn't spoil him like most grandmothers do. She didn't offer to help or visit us often. She just didn't seem to care. And that hurt not for me. I had already given up on having a good relationship with her, but for my son. I remember thinking that maybe she just needed time. Some people don't connect with babies right away, right? So I gave her space, hoping she would change, but she didn't. Even when she saw him, she was distant and disinterested. She didn't hold him unless it was absolutely necessary. She never talked about him like other grandmothers who can't stop praising their grandchildren. It was clear that she didn't like me, but I never thought she would make an innocent baby pay. However, last year we discovered that our son has Gilbert syndrome, which, in case you don't know, is a condition where the liver does not process bilirubin correctly. It is not fatal or anything serious. Basically, his body has more difficulty breaking down bilirubin, which can sometimes cause mild jaundice. But apart from that, he is a perfectly healthy child. We found out because he was sick with a common virus, and during a routine blood test, the doctor noticed that his bilirubin levels were slightly elevated. After some additional tests, he was diagnosed with Gilbert syndrome. At first, I was really scared. When a doctor tells you that your child has some kind of condition, your mind immediately imagines the worst possible scenario. But after the doctor explained everything to us, I felt much better. It turns out that many people have Gilbert syndrome and don't even know it because it doesn't really affect their daily life. The doctor literally told us, If you had to choose one medical condition, this would be the one you would choose because it is practically harmless. It was a relief to know that it was not something that would significantly impact my son's life. But, of course, Lena had to make a big deal out of it. When we told her about the diagnosis, she reacted strangely. Instead of asking questions or expressing concern like a normal grandmother would, she simply frowned. Then she asked, "Are you sure it's nothing serious?" I repeatedly reassured her, explaining that the doctor said it was harmless. But she insisted. "This doesn't happen in our family," she said, as if that meant it must come from my side. She had this accusatory tone, as if somehow I had tainted her lineage. I should have realized at that moment that I would make this into a bigger deal than it really was. A few weeks later, I started receiving calls and messages from distant relatives, people I barely spoke to. They asked me if my son was well, if he was really sick, if he would recover. Some sounded genuinely concerned, which confused me because, again, Gilbert syndrome is not a serious condition. At first I replied politely, simply explaining the condition to them as I had done with Lena. But the more calls I received, the more I realized that something strange was going on. Finally, one of my cousins revealed the truth to me. She said, "Didn't Lena tell us that your son has a serious liver problem?" I was furious. This woman who had never worried about my son, who barely interacted with him, was now telling everyone that he was sick, that he had some terrible liver disease. And the way she described it, as if it were something tragic that would ruin his life. I couldn't believe it. She was literally presenting my son as a fragile, sickly child when in reality he was perfectly fine. It was so frustrating. I had to make a huge effort to clear up this ridiculous rumor, explaining over and over again that no, my son wasn't sick. No, this wasn't some genetic curse. And no, there was nothing wrong with him. I became a walking medical brochure, explaining Gilbert syndrome to people who should have minded their own business. Of course, I confronted Lena about it and asked her why she was saying that my son had some serious liver condition when she knew full well that wasn't true. And do you know what she replied? She just shrugged and said, "I was just concerned. People asked and I told them what I knew, as if she hadn't exaggerated everything. As if she wasn't the reason people were constantly calling me, acting as if my son was seriously ill. And the worst thing was that she didn't even apologize. She didn't even seem to think she had done anything wrong. During this time, I was also arguing with Kenji because he never said anything to Lena. I always had to be the bad guy. Every time she did something cruel or overstepped the mark, it was my responsibility to mention it. And every time I did, Kenji minimized it as if it wasn't important. He would tell me that his mother was just old and confused, or that I was exaggerating. He made me feel like I was imagining things, like I was the one making a big deal out of nothing. It frustrated me so much. How could I be imagining things when she was literally going around telling everyone that our son had some kind of serious liver disease? How was that just her being concerned? She wasn't concerned. She was creating drama and making our son look weak or sickly for no reason. But no matter how hard I tried to explain this to Kenji, he never saw the problem. I hated how blind he was to his mother's actions. It wasn't just this incident. It was everything. Every double entendre, every hint, every time she made me feel like I wasn't good enough, and every time I brought it up, he just ignored it. "That's just how she is," he'd say. Or worse, "She doesn't mean anything by it." I think that was what hurt the most. It wasn't just that Lena treated me like an intruder, but that Kenji never stood up for me. He never confronted her, never asked her to stop, never acknowledged that she was treating me unfairly. And now, even when it came to our son, he still refused to see the problem. But then things took an unexpected turn. You see, Kenji's father, my 68-year-old father-in-law Callum, is a wealthy man. He made his fortune in real estate, buying properties when the market was low and selling when it was high. He is one of those people with a natural talent for business. He started modestly, renovating houses, and over the years he built a small empire. He now owns multiple properties that he rents out and basically lives a very comfortable life. 2 weeks ago, we attended a dinner to celebrate Callum and Lena's anniversary. It was an elegant event, one of those gatherings where everyone dresses formally, eats expensive food, and pretends that everything is fine even if it isn't. I wasn't particularly enthusiastic, but I went for Kenji. That's when I found out what Lena had been saying behind my back. Apparently, she had been telling people that her daughter's baby, my nephew, was the superior grandchild. According to her, he was the one who deserved a university fund from Callum's money because he would go on to do great things in life. Meanwhile, according to Lena, my son was sickly, weak, and would probably have too much trouble succeeding. I cannot describe the rage I felt at that moment. Look, I never expected Callum to pay for my son's future. I never assumed that my son would receive anything from his money, and honestly, I didn't care. Kenji and I always planned to support our son ourselves. We're not rich like Callum, but we do well financially, and we are more than capable of making sure our son has everything he needs. But what did bother me was that Lena looked down on my son. I was upset by the way she talked about him, as if he were inferior, as if he weren't worth investing in because he had Gilbert syndrome, which again is a completely harmless condition. The way she talked about him made my blood boil. So I did something I wouldn't normally do. I confronted her. Right there, in front of everyone, I stood up, looked her straight in the eye and asked her, "Did you really say that my son doesn't deserve a future because of a harmless genetic condition?" The whole room went silent. People stopped eating, forks halfway to their mouths, just watching. Lena, of course, tried to play innocent. "I was just being logical," she said, with that false expression of innocence she always used when caught. "Your son has a condition, Astrid. It's not my fault I'm thinking about the future, as if my son was destined to fail in life because of something that literally doesn't affect his intelligence, abilities, or future." I was so angry I didn't even care that we were in the middle of an elegant dinner. I didn't care that people were watching. I didn't care that Callum, Kenji, my sister-in-law, and many other relatives were sitting there in stunned silence. I said to her, loud and clear, "You don't even know what you're talking about. And if I ever hear you speak badly of my son again, I'll make sure you never see us again." Lena's face turned red. I could see she was embarrassed. I didn't expect her to face me in front of everyone. Normally, I was the one who let things go, who tried to be the more mature person, but not this time. This time, I wanted her to know that it was over. I didn't even stay to see what happened next. I took my things and left the party. I was too angry to sit there and act like everything was okay. However, last week, I got a call from Callum. He asked how I was, how my son was, if we were okay. I had no idea what Lena had told him, but something was definitely not right. Callum wasn't the type to call just like that for no reason. Then he told me he was setting up a trust fund for all his grandchildren, and my son's would be slightly larger than the rest because of all the money he would need for his future medical treatments. I was confused for a moment. Treatments? What treatments? I don't know exactly what Lena told him, but she clearly made it sound as if my son had some serious medical condition, something that required expensive treatments and lifelong care. And because Callum, for all his business acumen, is still a rather distant man when it comes to family matters, he didn't bother to check with me or Kenji. He simply accepted what Lena said and decided to help. Now, this is the interesting part. I could have corrected him right then and there. I could have told him that Gilbert syndrome is not serious, that my son is not sick, and that he would not need any special treatment, but I didn't. I remained silent, not because I wanted the extra money, but because for once, Lena's meddling really worked in my favor. I had spent so long belittling my son, making him seem weak and unworthy in comparison to my nephew. And now, Callum was prioritizing my son. He was giving him the largest trust fund. He was making sure that, no matter what, my son would be financially secure. And honestly, after everything Lena had done, I wasn't going to correct her mistake. So I just replied, "Thanks, Callum, that means a lot." I thought that would be the end of it, but of course Lena wasn't going to leave it at that. The next day, I got a call from her, and let me tell you, she was furious. She didn't even bother with the false pleasantries. She got straight to the point. "You need to call Callum and tell him the truth," she demanded. I played dumb. The truth about what? You know what? About your son's condition. You need to tell him he doesn't need extra money for treatments. That's fraud, Astrid. Fraud. As if I had planned some elaborate scheme to take money from Callum. As if I were the one spreading lies about my son's health. I took a deep breath and replied, "I didn't tell Callum anything about my son's condition. You did. So if you have a problem with that, maybe you should be the one to call him and sort it out. I could feel her anger through the phone. She probably wanted to scream at me, but she couldn't because she knew I was right. She was the one who had made my son look sickly and weak. And now that it had backfired, she wanted me to clean up her mess. No, it wasn't going to happen. And that's when she changed tactics. Astrid, listen, she said, trying to sound calmer, but her voice was still tense with anger. This isn't fair to the other grandchildren. Callum needs to treat them all equally. I almost laughed. Now she cared about fairness. Where was all this concern when she was talking about how my nephew was the superior grandchild? Where was this energy when she was telling everyone that my son would achieve nothing because of his condition? I simply replied, well, Callum is the one making this decision, not me. If you don't like it, take it up with him. I hated that answer. He started talking about how I was manipulating the situation, how I was taking advantage of Callum's generosity, and how this was unethical. And then he had the audacity to say, I should never have told him about your son's condition in the first place. And all I could think was, exactly, that was the one thing we agreed on. But instead of arguing, I just said, well, I guess you learned your lesson, right? I thought that would be the end of it, but no, because now Kenji is putting pressure on me too. He sat me down and told me I should call Callum and ask him to just keep the trust the same for all the grandchildren. He said it wasn't right for our son to get more money than the others when he doesn't really need it. And he warned me that if I didn't tell him, he would. Part of me feels guilty, but another part thinks, why should I be the one to fix this? Why is it my responsibility to undo something that Lena started? I don't know what to do. Should I let this run its course, or should I do what Kenji is asking and tell Callum to make the trust fund equal for everyone? I would love to hear your opinions. Update 1. Hi everyone. First of all, thank you for all your suggestions. I read every comment and really appreciated the different perspectives, but in the end, I did the exact opposite of what most of you suggested. I called Callum. I told him straight up that my son's condition is not serious, that he wouldn't need any future treatments. I didn't want there to be any misunderstandings. I didn't want anyone to think we were trying to take advantage of him. He replied that he didn't understand, that Lena had led him to believe that this was a serious condition. She had acted as if my son was going to need lifelong medical attention. I had suspected that she exaggerated things when she told him, but hearing it confirmed made me so angry. This woman had once again done everything she could to make my son seem weaker, sicker, and more helpless than he really is, just so she could promote my nephew, just to make my son seem like a burden instead of a normal, healthy child. I took a deep breath and said, this is exactly what she's been doing since I told her about his condition. I've explained several times that it's not serious, but she keeps twisting it and making it sound like my son is seriously ill. Callum sighed, and for the first time I felt he really understood how problematic Lena was. He's always been the kind of person who stays out of the drama, who avoids getting involved and lets things sort themselves out. He said, well, I've already made all the arrangements for the trust fund. Your son can have it. And that's when I said no. I told him I didn't want my son to have more than his cousins, not because I don't want him to have financial security. Of course I do, but because I know how this family works. My son is already treated differently. He is already seen as the youngest grandson in Lena's eyes. If he ended up receiving more money than the others, it would only give Lena and the rest of the family more reason to distance him. I said to Callum, I don't want my son to be pushed even further away. I don't want his cousins to resent him for this. He was quiet for a moment and then said, okay, I'll take care of it. And that was it. Honestly, I feel much better now. Sometimes it's more important to keep the peace than to fight for something that in the long run could cause more harm than good. I don't want my son to grow up feeling like an outsider in his own family. If keeping things equal means he has a better chance of having a normal relationship with his cousins, then I prefer that to extra money any day. In the end, my son isn't losing anything. Kenji and I will make sure he has everything he needs. What matters most to me is that he grows up knowing he is loved and valued no matter what Lena says. Update 2. Hi everyone, it's been about 2 months since my last update and honestly, things have been pretty quiet until yesterday. Something happened and I need to vent. I've been avoiding my in-laws' house for obvious reasons. Every time I set foot there, something happens that makes me want to tear my hair out. And after the whole trust fund thing, I thought the best way to keep my sanity was to just stay away. But yesterday, my sister-in-law called me, and I wasn't prepared for what she had to tell me. Apparently, Lena has been talking again, but this time she took things to a whole new level. She has been telling people that she doesn't believe my son is really Kenji's son. This woman, who already treats my son as if he were inferior to her other grandson, is now spreading rumors that my son isn't even the biological son of her own son. I was stunned. Where was this coming from? What kind of twisted logic led her to this conclusion? I asked my sister-in-law exactly what she had been saying, and apparently Lena's reasoning, if it can be called that, is that my son doesn't exactly look like Kenji. First of all, he's a small child. He's still growing. Second, he does look like Kenji. Maybe he's not an exact clone, but he has his eyes, his nose, even his expressions. And third, even if he didn't, genetics doesn't work like a photocopying machine. Children don't always look exactly like one of their parents. Sometimes they look like members of the extended family, sometimes they are a mixture of both parents, and sometimes they simply have their own unique appearance. But no, according to Lena, the fact that my son is not an exact copy of Kenji must mean that he is not his. I don't even know how to react to this. If I confront her, she will simply deny it, as she always does. She will act surprised and offended, and say that she never said that, or that it was just a joke, or that I misinterpreted her words. And even if I prove that she did say it, she will simply shift the blame onto someone else. I spoke to Kenji, and he thinks I'm overreacting. He really had the audacity to say, "She's just talking. It doesn't mean anything." Is he serious? She is questioning the paternity of our son, and that means nothing. If she is saying this to family members, who else is she saying it to? Is she planting doubts in people's minds? Is she trying to turn Kenji against me? What will happen if one day she manages to get so far inside his head that he actually starts questioning it, even though there is absolutely no reason to do so? I told Kenji that I'm not going to ignore this, but at the same time, I don't even know what to do. If I confront her, she'll deny it. If I ignore it, she'll just keep talking. What should I do? Update 3. Hi everyone, it's been 4 months since my last update, and honestly, I've been dealing with a lot. I didn't even have the energy to post about it until now, but after everything that's happened, I feel like I need to share it. After hearing the horrible rumors about Lena, I told Kenji straight up that his mother had crossed the line this time. There was no going back. At first, he tried to argue with me. The same old thing, that she didn't mean it, and she was just talking without thinking, but this time I wasn't going to accept it. I stood my ground. I said, "Listen, you can see your mother if you want. I'm not stopping you, but our son and I are finished with Lena. We will never speak to her again." Kenji didn't like that. He kept saying, "You can't just cut off contact like that. Our son needs his grandmother." And I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Which grandmother? The one who has been treating him like a stranger since the day he was born? The one who spreads lies about him? The one who is literally questioning whether he is your son? That grandmother?" He couldn't argue with that because even he knew I was right. At that moment, I think he finally realized that there was no way to defend her this time. But since Kenji is Kenji, he still tried to find a way to fix things. He organized a meeting between me and Lena, and I really didn't want to do it, but I accepted because I thought, well, let's just clear everything up so there won't be any misunderstandings later. As soon as we sat down, Lena went into a completely irrational mode. She didn't apologize. She didn't try to deny what she said. No, she doubled down. She looked me in the eye and demanded that I take a paternity test. At that point, I just exploded. I got up and told her to leave. I told her we would never have this conversation again, that she had officially lost all access to me and my son, and that she would never be welcome in my home again. Kenji tried to intervene, but I turned to him and said, "This is the last time this woman is in my house. If you want to be a good husband and father, you will respect that." And he did. For the first time, he really took my side. He told Lena that until she apologized and I accepted her apology, she and I would not have to be in the same room again. Of course, I have no intention of forgiving her, even if she apologizes. Some things are just beyond repair, and for me, this is one of them. So that's how we are now. Kenji still visits her, but never brings our son. And I never ask about her. It's as if she doesn't exist in my world, and honestly, it feels wonderful. Thank you all for your advice and support throughout this whole complicated process. I don't know what the future will bring, but for now, I finally feel like I can breathe easy.